Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Janice Gerbrandt, and I'm one of the hosts for the Professional Development Virtual Group here on PASS. We are here with Alexander Arvidsson, and he's going to talk to us about tech, and specifically Talk Tech to Me, improving your technical presentation skills. For everybody who's attending today, feel free to ask questions at any time. One person's not hearing audio, but I'm sure other people are. Alexander, give me a nod. You can hear me, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Other people have audio. So other than that question, feel free to ask questions throughout the session. Alexander will take the questions at the end, so I'll save them up and present them to him at the end, and he can give us his answers at that point. And I am going to let Alexander take it away. Thanks, Alexander, for talking with us today.
Thank you very much for having me. And I'm going to say good evening because it's 6 p.m. here in sunny Sweden. Here's the deal. A presenter has roughly 30 seconds to capture the attention of the audience. I'll spend the next hour showing you numerous ways to royally screw those 30 seconds and the rest of the session up completely. We'll start with a saying. The most important thing to hear in communication is to hear what isn't being said. This was said by Peter Ferdinand Drucker. He was an Austrian-born American management consultant, educator, author, and his writings contributed to the philosophical and practical foundations of the modern business corporation. So a fairly important guy. Not everyone is a presenter is one of the most common things that I hear when I pitch this session, but I disagree. Consider your everyday life. Most every interaction with another person is an application of presentation skills. So why not learn to use your hands to make yourself understood even better? Being a technical presenter has its own unique challenges. You are not only supposed to be an expert on your topic, you need to be able to clearly and efficiently get your point across. As the technical stuff is considered the most important and easiest to measure the competency in, many technical presenters whip up amazing and brilliant sessions with little or no regard to the presentation itself. Well, that sounds like a good idea in theory. In practice, it runs headfirst into something called Mehrabian's law. And this is the result of a study made back in the 60s, I think. And it's actually one of the most incorrectly interpreted studies. What it really means is that when it comes to conveying emotional intent, the spoken words only account for about 7% of the information conveyed. It does not mean that I don't have to learn German or Russian, because apparently only 7% of whatever is being said is transferred by the words. No, it's all about how you convey my emotional intent. So that means my body language and my voice take up a much bigger part of this information flow than the spoken words. Having said that, the information that I actually say is, of course, very, very important. And we can say that it doesn't quite matter what you say as how you say it. And it gets actually worse because many presenters confuse the what and how when it comes to the message as well. I'm of the opinion that people want to hear about what and are quite able on their own to look up the exact how. So how does Mehrabian's law stack up to technical speaking? Well, is technical speaking any different from any other speaking? No, not really. But the examples and stories told must be even more relevant to the points made. You're going to face the same problems, the same challenges, and apply the same skill set as with any other topic. But there will be the added bonus, if you will, of trying to convey a technical concept. We are often dealing with less feelings and more hard facts, and that changes some aspects of how we speak about the subject. This session is all about why soft skills really should be called core skills, why practice makes perfect, and why size matters in slides. My goal is to give you several tools and techniques for upping your technical presentation game. My name is Alexander Arvidsson. I have roughly 20 years in IT, pretty much all of it spent with data or databases in some way, shape, or form. These days, I work for Atea in Sweden, mainly doing evangelism, training, architecture with the technologies related to the Microsoft data platform stack. My favorite toys in the box are SQL Server, Azure, and Power BI. In short, I help people take better care of their data. I go all over Europe speaking at conferences. I teach Microsoft courses. I'm a Pluralsight author. I co-host a podcast, and I'm a huge Star Wars fan of that. Yes, it's life size. And yes, it's taking me over 4 years. And no, I am not done yet. But pretty much the whole thing was scratch built by me. At the end of the day, we all want to convey a message, a key takeaway point, or maybe plant a thought. There is a word for that concept, and that word is a story. Keep this fundamental piece of information in your mind as we progress through the hour, because everything I will talk about has to be connected to and further the telling of the story. Most everything is a story, even though most people aren't really used to think of things like that. Maybe you spent some time around a campfire telling scary stories when you were a kid, or you played role-playing games with your friends. Because if you did, congratulations, you're ahead of the pack. Everything is a story, and properly formatted, everything can be conveyed as a story. This requires the telling of the story to follow a specific set of rules. It needs a natural progression so people can anticipate the flow of the story. It is most often divided into scenes that tie into this progression. And at the end, we arrive, hopefully, at a conclusion. You, as the presenter, is the storyteller. You are having a conversation with your audience and not talking to them. Kind of hard doing a webinar, but you get the point. You are the storyteller, and you are the message, not the slides, not the demos. Keep that in mind. I've divided the concept of body language, which is the first part of this webinar, into 4 parts, and we're going to tackle them one by one. The first part is gestures. The second part is how to move around, and you might actually want to resize with the windows a bit so you can see me more than my presentation. The third part deals with facial expression, and the fourth and final part, or the first part, explores how to use your voice. Are you ready for door number 1? This is a spine board. It is used by paramedics to attach a patient that must be completely immobilized in order to protect the spine or any other part that must not be further injured. I've used one of these many, many times when I was a paramedic back in the late 90s. And trust me when I say that they do an admirable job of keeping people stiff. There's a reason we call them stiff as a board. It is also a very good example of how most new speakers both feel and look the first time they get out on stage. They either stand like a spine board with deer in the headlights look, or they start to do some weird stuff. There are several classic poses. We have the forklift, we have the left rabbit, we have the right rabbit, we have the double rabbit, we have the fig leaf, we have the soldier, Wonder Woman, or I don't want to be here anymore, or any other way of looking at things. So where should you put your hands? These two things that have a funny way of being in your face or in someone else's face. Well, I'll tell you what, it's pretty easy. Take these, put them on your hand, at your sides, just let them hang. That's it. This is, in my opinion, the absolutely best place to put your hands when you're not using them. Don't fall into the trap of staying up here because they are not doing anything for anyone here. It just kind of looks silly. So put them on your sides and don't think about them. This is going to feel awkward. And I mean, awkward taking to level 12. It's okay. This is where they're supposed to be. This looks pretty relaxed to the audience. The purpose of gestures is to act as a non-verbal anchor. Translated into English, that simply means that gestures make people listen to you. The funny thing is that gestures make people pay attention to the acoustics of speech, making gestures not merely an add-on, but a fundamental part of language. Gesturing also helps you access memories, because memories are stored by a very complex mechanism, of association. And the more things you can connect the memory to, the easier it becomes to recall said memory. By adding gestures to your presentation, the presentation itself becomes easier to remember. So why all the fuss? How hard can it be just to wave around a bit? Well, it isn't really, but it helps to have some pointers on what is so-called functional gestures and how to employ them. You see, one of the most fundamental things about using gestures, they have to be purposeful. Otherwise, you start staring at my hands and completely tune out what I'm saying. And we don't want that, unless you've already done so. There is a spectrum of gestures, all the way to from teeny tiny gestures up to the industrial sized stuff. And the technical term for this is called the jazz hands. I'll give you a piece of advice about jazz hands. Don't use jazz hands. Picture a box, roughly in front of your chest. This is where you most often want to be. Not necessarily always, but most of the time. Because if I gesture underneath the box, it kind of looks a bit uninterested, meh. If I wave around above the box, it becomes bombastic and pretty much too much. It can be used as an effect, but not necessarily just stand here and use your hands here. So stay in the box, use your hands in the box, and when you're not using them, yes, go back to storage pretty much. Okay? The only safe movement and the only safe use of body language is no body language at all and no hand gestures at all. But be very careful where you are when you start to use your hand gestures. This guy, Borat, does not care at all about decorum or pretty much anything else. But one thing that I learned I wouldn't say the hard way because I did my homework. There's so many things that you can do harm by using specific signs. Let's say this. This is usually interpreted as a very good thing, or if you're diving, it's time to go up to the surface. But if you're in Western Africa, Iran, or Greece, for instance, this is the equivalent of giving the finger. Probably not what you're aiming for. And it's kind of the same with the AOK sign. Depending on where you are, Germany or Brazil, it can be the equivalent to the finger or just zero. Not a very good gesture. So be mindful of where you are and what audience you have. Having said that, let's look at a few ways to use hands and gestures to your advantage. The first one, and the most basic one, is numbers. And it's simply anytime I say a number, 4, I hold up the same number of fingers. Or if I say 50, I can just use 5. And whatever you do, do not say 3 and put up 2 fingers, because then you're into something called cognitive dissonance. The brain sees one thing and it hears something else, and it just goes completely bananas. So use fingers to count on them. You can also say 1, 2, 3, 4, and whenever I increase my number, I go up 1 finger. I can go backwards, 4, 3, 2, 1. Be very careful when you count down so you don't find yourself having the middle finger extended. Yeah, more common than you'd like to know. The second one is equally useful, and it can be used to show differences in size or levels. You can use this to indicate how small something is, or that this is bigger than this one because that's smaller, or maybe this guy is pretty a big deal, or yeah, it's a small problem. You can also use the very small thing by pinching your finger. Yeah, very teeny tiny, very efficient. Many of you are probably using this, but overdo it. Make it bigger because it gives you more impact. Whenever you gesture into someone else's space or personal area, you're bound to tie them to your words. Pointing is very aggressive. There are several ways to point without just pointing at them using your finger, but we can do the you gesture in order to get someone included, because I'm me, you're you, and together we are doing something. And it's kind of a great attention grabber if someone's mind is wandering. You just reach out to them and say, how are you doing? What's happening? Anytime we bring our hands towards our heart and chest, when I take my hand and bring it towards my own heart and chest, I indicate myself. And I have heard and seen sneaky speaking coaches that tell people that you can actually use this in order to point towards yourself when talking about anything positive, because it's going to connect that positive thing to the speaker. Sneaky and very useful. Use it with care. Props. Stage actors know that good actors use props and bad actors are used by their props. Any object you employ in a presentation should help further the story and its impact. Is it necessary? If so, how can you use it effectively? Props are parts of the story, not the story. I'm actually holding a prop right now, my clicker. This is something that I have to consider and something that can seriously screw with my gestures if I'm not careful. It's a bit of an anchor because whenever I hold something in my hands, things change in the way I move. I have a friend, she's been a presenter for years and years. She's amazing at what she does, but she needs to use a clicker mounted on her finger. It's in a ring. Because if she is to hold one of these clickers, she turns into a seal. I've seen it. It is epic. Not necessarily good for the presentation, but it's very fun to look at. So use this one with caution and realize that it might actually limit you in ways that you did not think about. There are so-called mannerisms, things you want to avoid while speaking. They're most often completely unintentional, making them all the more dangerous. Wringing hands are a good way. to warm up your hands, but it kind of comes across as tense and indecisive, sometimes a bit aggressive as well. Very many people touch their face, and your face is probably going to be exactly where you left it 15 minutes ago. So there is no point making sure that your nose and your beard is still attached. If it isn't, you're going to have other problems. Playing with objects, rings, clickers, things in your hair, whatever, don't. Keep your hands to yourself. Make sure that they are not in the picture if you don't use them. Biting knuckles, I've actually seen this where people are so scared or so nervous that they start munching their knuckles. Again, avoid it. And of course, my personal favorite, the seal. Whenever I hold something in my hands, I start looking like a seal. Don't do this, please. Same goes with clapping. It's very easy to just, whenever I say something and I'm done with whatever I'm saying, I clap. Keep track of your hands. Otherwise, people are going to look at the hands and just expect the next clap. So, general rule, slow down. It is your session. It is your hour or 40 minutes or whatever time it is. You decide what's in that session. I have no idea what you're going to say. So you decide what's going to happen in your session. Slow down. You control the time. Consider your gestures. Some people do a lot of gestures. Some people do much less gestures. But consider what you're using the gestures for and make sure that they're purposeful and useful and reinforcing your message. Practice in front of a mirror. This is important, people. You cannot do this just standing and thinking that you know what you're doing. The absolutely least you need to do is to look in a mirror. You probably need to videotape yourself. Relax your shoulders. This one's pretty hard because it's very easy to go up here with your shoulders. Make sure that they are rolled back and down. This frees up space in your chest and it's easier to breathe. Your voice comes down, everything slows down. If you tense up in your shoulders, the voice gets squeakier, it's harder to breathe, everything speeds up. And of course, seek inspiration. Look at other speakers. Steal with pride. There is no such thing as a copyrighted move or anything like that. Just go for it. Go forth and scour the internets, YouTube. You're going to find so many things. Right. We're going to the other one, the movement. And to keep your audience from nodding off, just keep thinking nods, neutral, open, defined, and strong. Begin in a neutral position with your hands at your sides. It keeps you open to the audience. Use gestures that are defined and make them strong. What usually happens is that people realize that they need to own the room or the stage. Then they start to pace, which is kind of fun for 15 seconds because you're going to be following them while they are pacing around and just hoping that they are not falling off the stage, or in some cases, very much hoping for them to fall off the stage. And make sure that you have a reason to move. Just like fidgeting with your hands, it's easy to think that movement must be had just for the sake of moving. Think back to the whole point of this session. You're telling a story, and anything that amplifies the story is good. Anything that detracts from the story is bad. When you have decided to move, it is time to think about when to move. By stomping around at the same time as you try to convey an important point, people will lose track of what's being said and focus on your movements. Thus, move between what you're saying, i.e. move as a transition. Just as we talked about functional gestures, the same concept applies to movement as well. Is your intended movement going to amplify the message? If so, do it. You own this space. Excuse me. You own this space. You own the stage. You own the room. Use that space. Fill the space. If I have a couple of square meters, I should probably use that space as opposed to just standing in the corner and hoping that nobody will notice me. Because the whole point is that I'm here, front and center, speaking to you. My space. Mind your spine. My spine needs to be straight. And this was one of the hardest things for me to actually learn to do subconsciously, because I always find myself here, which is kind of a bummer because I've spent 20 years with martial arts. I should know better, but I need to consciously think about my spine each and every time I go up on stage. You should too. And again, don't overdo it. Anyone who's seen Mr. Bean knows what I say when I say there is a way to overdo things. If you just flail around and do amazing stuff with your body, people are going to remember you for it, but they won't have a clue what you just said. Again, functional movement. You're the presentation. Moving is supporting that presentation. So how do you walk about with purpose? Well, we martial artists spend a great deal of time thinking about the biomechanics of movement. One can stomp. One can move like my old French teacher, which I don't think I ever saw actually leaving the ground despite just hovering around. Nobody knew. Or you can do anything in between. How you move conveys different emotions. And it gives subtle flavors to the story. Because if I move very, very quickly, it's going to infer some kind of stress. And if I move slightly slower when I talk, everything kind of relaxes. Everything becomes slower. I can use the stage as a mental whiteboard as well. I started teaching back in 1999 at the age of 21. Now, I was very good at the technical stuff, but not at anything else. Fast forward a few years to 2010, I started speaking at internal company events and such, and now we're at 2018, and I'm talking to you remotely. You saw what I just did? I used different points on the stage to anchor different parts of my story. Back here we have the 1990s, here we have the 2010s, and here we have 2018. A progression going upwards. But keep in mind, most people in the Western world read from left to right. That means that I have to mirror my movement. This is your left, my right. This is your right, my left. And I probably need to go from here to here. Otherwise, yeah, it kind of be hard to keep track of. We can also build on the idea of positions on the stage. This is especially important when you have a big screen or a projector. Because if I go over here and I start talking about numbers, last year we have this revenue or we made these many sales. And then I move over here to talk about a story about what happened last year when we sold these many bananas. It's a way of helping the audience to connect different parts of my presentation to different parts of the overarching story. Over here, I'm going to be presenting a story. I'm going to talk about a story. Over here, I'm probably going to be talking about hard numbers and facts like that. And whatever you do, do not stand in the way of your presentation, i.e. don't stand in front of the presentation, and whatever you do, do not stand in the light of the projector. Kind of obvious, but I see it all the time. So what can you do that is completely wrong? I've seen leaning so many times, especially when you're tall. You're standing on one leg, just kind of cool and relaxed. You're not stable at all. This is a stable position. Make sure you have a stable position, otherwise people are going to kind of fall over as well. I've also seen people cross their legs, and this is pretty much the same way that as one of my cats do it. And while it looks kind of funny when she does it, not as much when a presenter does it, because this looks unsure. We can combine this and go to swaying. And this is also very, very irritating and very, very common. We've all seen the guy in usually the first row that nods with everything you say. And while that is kind of irritating, it is way worse when the presenter is doing it. Yeah, no, stop bobbing your head. We have seen the zombie shamble where presenters realize that they actually need to move over here, maybe over there. How is that a fluid motion? How is that a functional gesture unless your whole session is on the zombie apocalypse? Or we have seen people absolutely dance the night away, and it's the same thing. You just focus on the dance, and whatever is being said is gone. Out the window, gone. Doesn't work very well. So what can you do? Be mindful of your posture. Take care to make sure that you are standing very grounded. You're stable and you're grounded. Practice in front of someone else, because you're going to be needing feedback. If you don't have anybody else, videotape yourself. But it's easier if you have someone who can say, yeah, you're leaning like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. You need to move just a bit. Yeah, there we go. You're now standing straight. Designate spots on the stage before you go on the stage, i.e. make sure you do your preparations, because over here I want to do this, over here I want to do that, and make sure that you stick to this. Because if you start to change the spots and do different things on the different spots, the whole thing just falls apart. Claim your space. This is my space. It is your space on the stage. Your stage, your presentation, you own the room. Act accordingly. Claim your space and use your space. If you can, and most people can, I mean, the advent of phones, record a video of yourself. Use that video to see what your mannerisms are and kill them, all of them. It is hard, but it needs to be done. This is a cat. Yeah, it is a cat. Would you say that it is happy or sad or contemplating the best way of ripping you to shreds? Yeah, it's not that easy, is it? I have two cats. I don't know what this cat is thinking. Then again, I usually don't know what my cats are thinking either. Me, I have a stone face worthy of a secret agent. While that comes in handy at sometimes, definitely not on stage. I need to very consciously think about what my face is doing, or more specifically, what it's not doing, or it just turns to stone. And if it does go stony, I'm kind of screwed, because I must make sure to break that immediately. That's one of the things that I work with the most. I need to keep my face animated. Otherwise, it just defaults to hideously boring Nordic cold guy. Not very interesting. What kind of facial expressions should you use? Well, you tell me. It's all about the story. Again, All facial expressions are related to emotions. Professional speakers, they practice their body language and expressions to accompany their stories and make their message memorable as well as believable. Are your facial expressions clarifying what you're saying? Your face is going to make people believe you're trustworthy or not. Go to the mirror and practice your talk silently. Is your face helping you communicate? Be aware of any artificial, unfriendly, or deadpan expressions you're making and start including facial expressions. They are there to enhance the story and reflect your emotions, i.e. you're going to need to feel these emotions in order to convey them with your face. That's hard, people, not something you learn overnight. You use this to set moods. Basically, you're playing your audience. And while smiling, most of you are going to actually smile. And if I look less than happy, you're going to feel the same way. And this is due to the mirroring neurons. They are placed in your forehead. Whatever I do, you are going to mimic. Not consciously, but that's part of the way we humans communicate. So I can take my emotions and project them on you, thus making my message and my story resonate easier with your ideas and your feelings. Again, don't overdo it. It is so easy to go completely bonkers with this. And yeah, just like the zombie shamble or the dance doesn't work. Make sure that you do just enough and that it actually enhances your story. So what kind of mannerisms can we see here? Well, we've seen the stone face. I actually went to Finland and did a SQL Saturday and Tech Days a couple of months back. And that was the most difficult place that I've ever been to. I did my session and then I asked the people, well, what did you think? Was it a good session? They looked at me and said, yes, it was very good. Okay, what does that mean? Very good as very good or just crap? Yes, it was very good. So there you have the archetypical stone face. Tics, depending on if you are more or less nervous, you might develop tics. These tics are most often something you can train yourself to get rid of, but you cannot do it unless you know you have them. Videotape yourself or have someone brutally honest look at your session and point out every tic you have. Same with twitching eyes. I mean, some people have their eyes pretty much everywhere except at the audience. While it can be scary to look the audience in the eyes, I get that, look between the eyes. You cannot decide if I'm looking you in the eyes or if I'm looking at between your eyes when I look at you like this. So that's one way to do it. And don't stare at someone. It's kind of unnerving when someone on stage stares at one single person all the time. Just don't. Sweep your eyes over your audience, linger on some people, and make sure that you see everyone, especially the people in the back and the people in the far right or left in your case, and the far right. And don't stare at the floor. There is surprisingly little going on the floor. And while some people are going to be thinking, what is he looking at? Most people are going to feel that, yeah, he's not interested in what he's saying, so screw it, I'm not either. Look at your audience. You are there for them, not the other way around. So how can we solve this, or what can we do to improve this? Practice in a mirror. Again, you're going to have to look at what you're doing. And if I can be so bold, record yourself, because it's the best way of decoupling your actions from actually looking at them. Kill your stone face. I must, and I cannot emphasize this enough, I must be mindful of this every time I go on stage. I need to kill my stone face the first thing that I do. Otherwise, I'm going to fight this the whole session. You would not believe the faces that I've made just before coming on here. And yeah, Janice should be happy she didn't have to see that either. Smile. This is fun. And if it is part of your story that you're conveying something that is fun, smile. I'm very bad at it. I usually come across as too serious. It's part of my stone face, but smile. It works. Scale up your facial expressions. Depending on where you're talking, if it's a very intimate setting with maybe 10 to 15 people, you don't have to use any bigger sized facial expressions because you're going to be very close to the audience. Same thing here. I'm on a webinar. It is kind of easy for me to convey very subtle movements and subtle faces. But if you're in a big room, you're going to need to increase your facial expressions to make sure that the people in the back can see you smile too. Or when everything just goes to crap in a handbasket, you need to show them that something happened. So scale up or scale down your facial expressions accordingly. Use your eyes. They are very, very powerful tools, but don't use them to scare the living daylights out of your audience. Sweep them around, linger from time to time, and don't stare and don't just fly around like a laser. We're coming into something that is kind of hard. And it can be argued that using the voice is a wholly separate session, but it can also be argued that the voice is physical, so it's a part of body language as well. The energy and the emphasis. Emphasis is the stress you place on important ideas, which should come naturally. But you also need enough energy so your voice encompasses your audience. Nothing turns off listeners more than a speaker who makes them work too hard, reminding them of the distance between the speaker and the audience. So, in my opinion, if you have access to a microphone, use that. It takes some training to get used to a microphone, but it's well worth the time. Pitch inflection, that means that you're varying or inflecting your pitch. It kind of adds color and excitement to what you say. A pitch without any variation is a monotone. And I think most of the people who has gone to the university or basically any school are well versed in the professor that drones on in the same monotone without no changes in speed or pitch or tempo, and it is so exciting. Oh, I am dying. This is so exciting. Yeah, you get the point. And that kind of leads into rhythm and pace because I can use the speed of my voice to convey different parts of my story. Because if I speed up a bit, everyone's going to go up, whoa, dude, what's happening? Something exciting is happening, and we need to do something about it right now. Or I can slow down, increase my use of pausation, which actually leads to the silence part. Again, I control the stage. I control the delivery of this story. I control where there should be silence. And few things are as important to use as silence. And boy, is it hard to stand on stage being quiet. It takes some learning, but again, it is so worth it. It is so important to use silence to further your message. Remember the quote, there's nothing more than a perfectly timed pause or silence can convey everything. This guy, he was someone during the Second World War. This is Winston Churchill. He have done several very good speeches. Most of them were sent by radio. He did them at Parliament, but most people have heard them because, yeah, again, they were sent by radio. His most remembered one is, "We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets, we shall fight in the hills, and we shall never surrender." See how he repeats, "We shall fight." If you had written this down, it would have been something like, "We should fight on the beaches, comma, the landing grounds, comma, in the fields, comma, the streets, the hills, and we shall never surrender." Not quite the same punch. So use Winston Churchill or use Martin Luther King. Everybody remembers, "I have a dream." How many times did he say, "I have a dream"? You can pause this recording and think about it, or I can just give you the number. 8. 8 times he said, "I have a dream." That's a very good way of beating the message home. So very, very useful. Take these guys and this woman. She's called Amanda Palmer. This is from a TED Talk called The Art of Asking, and she has one of the best introductions and startups of a session that I have ever seen. Her command of working with the audience, using her voice, using movement, using props is superb. Very good inspiration. So go ahead and find her on YouTube TED Talk. So what kind of mannerism do people express with voice? Well, yeah, very, very common. And this is part of how we communicate as a small group. Up to 6 people, we are going to use the ums to signal that, no, I'm not quite done with whatever message I'm conveying right now, but as soon as I'm done, I will give you opportunity to speak. This does not work in a huge setting as we are having here. So the whole thing needs to go away. Just park it. You need to learn to think quietly. Take your ums and convert them into silence. Is part of the English language, so 1 or 2 ums here and there is fine, but don't go umming all the time. Repeating for a purpose is a good thing. Repeating just because you have no idea what you just said is not a good thing. Nervous laughter, you would be surprised how many, especially Europeans, have this very bad mannerism. Avoid that as the plague. Speaking too fast, very, very common when you have a metric ton of stuff to get through. You have an hour and you have so much amazing content that you want to share with your audience. So you speak 3 times as fast as you really should just in order to cram everything in. I'm sorry to say it, you have too much stuff in there. Take it away and back down with your speed. And the monotone. This is boring. Don't do monotone. Learn to use your voice. And of course, you can always use 2 different difficult words, convoluted words. Say it simple, keep it easy. And of course, there's no point in speaking too quietly. Again, if you have a microphone, you can use this to your advantage. You can whisper and everybody's going to hear it. But if you're on stage with no microphone and you're whispering or speaking too silent, nobody's going to hear you and they're going to up and leave. So how do you do this? Practice on someone else. This one is hard to do on your own, even if you record yourself. Breathe with your diaphragm. Make sure that you use your whole body when you're breathing and not just the upper part, because you're going to be out of breath and it's squeaky, hard to breathe. Learn basic voice warm-up techniques. This is most often done by talking to a singer or a voice coach. Learn to use silence and pausation. Do not be afraid of using silence. And of course, you can do more silence than it is absolutely necessary if that furthers your story. Learn to accept your accent. Me, I'm fairly musical. It is surprisingly easy for me to kill my accent, but I can tell you that a very normal accent where I come from is the very Swedish accent. While this can be pretty funny, it does not detract from getting the message across. It doesn't matter what kind of accent you have. As long as you are clear and concise, you're going to get your message across. It doesn't matter if you have an accent. Right. Here's the thing. Bored people don't stay awake very long. Just look at any cat. If you can keep the cat awake for more than 4 minutes, good on you. Attention span is a pretty rare commodity, and most people have it for 4 minutes. 4 minutes. Not much at all. That means that every 4 minutes, we need to throw in something different, something new, or something emotionally stimulating. There are a gazillion things you can do. For instance, raise your hands. How many have done this? Can I see a raise of hands? I can tell you a story. I can compare to things. I can bring in a prop. I can use metaphors, examples, change my language. I can go in with a provocation, music, long pause, compliments, two alternatives. The list can be very, very long. These are what is called spices. And every 4 minutes, try to put them in. And actually put in your slide deck, in your speaker notes, that here you should do this and here you should do that. It needs to be in there in order to stay awake. Make sure that people are staying awake. Which kind of brings me to a pet peeve of mine. Demos. What is your point? Is your point to show off your exceptional PowerShell skills? How to bang out some cool, unreadable scripts that will do something? The reason I ask is that I've seen hundreds of demos where I could not answer that question. Think about that question. Why is the demo there? Let's go back to one of my earliest points. Tell them what, not how. Most people are quite able to look up exactly how something should be done. But again, we keep showing them exactly how. Talk about how, talk about what instead of how. What or why. I generally avoid demos for several reasons. One is that it's very difficult to get timing to work. Another one is the fact that Murphy has a love for helping out with demos. And a failed demo, in my opinion, is close to useless and damages the audience trust in the presenter. Having said that, in the few instances where I deem the demo absolutely essential, I pre-record it. That way, I know exactly at what speed it's going to be working, what's going to happen, and most of all, I don't care if I lose internet connectivity. How many of you have been to conferences where the internet just doesn't work? Now, if your pre-recorded demo start doing new things, you have other issues. While we're talking about demos, let's consider vision. Most often you as a presenter don't get to decide the size of the room, and you definitely don't have a say when it comes to the audience's eyesight. Texts on a slide must, and I cannot emphasize this enough, must be readable all the way from the back of the room. If people can't read your slides, it is not their fault. Keep the number of messages per slide close to 1 and make sure to check what your slide deck looks like from the back of the room, like 20 meters away. However, while many people actually remember this when it comes to slide design, not everyone does with demos. For some unfathomable reason, presenters seem to think that if they see the demo fine, then everybody in the back do too. Unfortunately, it turns out that is not the case. Remember, folks, size matters when it comes to demos. This is the solution. Completely free and absolutely amazing. Zoom it. With the touch of a button, keyboard combination, the screen zooms in. Please, please, please you zoom it. No ifs and buts. Do it. There are several choices for recording screencasts, ranging from the free, the medium priced, and the pretty expensive stuff. I've only used Camtasia as I'm spoiled. Being an MCT certified trainer, I get a free license. But many people swear both with EasyVid and Adobe Premiere. And of course, Premiere can do so many cool things, but you're going to have to pay through the nose to get it. To sum up this hour, soft skills are essential for all presenters, but especially technical presenters. Some of the stuff we present is so dry that they'll have to close at least 2 lanes at the swimming pool during delivery. Practice makes perfect. Find a mirror, an unsuspecting family member, or your cat, and practice the heck out of your presentation, focusing not on the content, but the delivery. Demos are difficult. Ask yourself if you really need them, and if the answer is yes, consider pre-recording them. I've given you several tools and techniques for upping your technical presentation game, and in just a second, I'm going to open the floor for questions. But you know your technical stuff. You are the message. Consider the soft skills of your presentations and make your message clearer, more to the point, and simply more interesting. Take a look at the other technical presenters at conferences. They are among the best and brightest when it comes to sheer technical knowledge. Some of them are more comfortable on stage than others, but pretty much everyone could benefit from consciously thinking about presentation skills, especially in combination with technical content. Improve your soft skills. Go practice. Be epic. My name is Alexander, and I thank you very much for your time. Are there any questions? Janice, take it away.
There are questions, but thank you, Alexander. That was really, really great. And I will get to some questions. I think another one just popped up.
Super.
Here's a. I'm going to start in the middle. Oops. Where'd they go? There they go. So from somebody who speaks at SQL Saturdays, to keep his or her audience interested,
Right.
They make it a point to get the audience involved, interaction or involvement of some kind. What are your thoughts on that?
I would say that is amazing. That is something that I would classify as a spice, and any spice can be overused, but used sparingly and used wisely, it is super great. Look at one of my personal heroes, Brent Ozar. His How to Think Like the SQL Server Engine. He actually hands out pieces of paper in order to show how an index works. That is very interactive. So I'd say go for it. It is very seldom used. Make it your thing.
Okay, here's another. Oh, lots of thank yous. Sorry, and I will scan through those. Here's a good one. So there's a quote by Marshall McLuhan, and the quote is, "The medium is the message." The question asker would like to know what your take is on that, and how might you use different media, body language, slides, demos, etc., to maximize effective delivery?
I'm not entirely sure that I understand the question, and I think this is partly due to the fact that English is not my first language.
I
Um,
will say that this question came in at the top of the hour, and I really feel like you probably have dealt with this. I mean, you did certainly talk about body language. You talked about slides. You talked about demos. And can I say, I really appreciate your advice to keep the demos down and maybe not do them at all. I am also one of these people. I want to know the what and the why. Um, and the technical how is usually lost in a field of text and executing stored queries. So yeah, I'm just glad to hear somebody preaching it.
yeah, yeah, I agree completely.
Let's see. Let's scan through these. Huh. Okay, here's a question. What should I do if my mind goes blank while standing in front of an audience?
That is a very, very good question, and you would not believe how common it is. And depending on where you are in your presentation, I always say to people, make sure that you have memorized the first 5 minutes of your presentation. And I mean memorized. If I wake you up in the middle of the night, you need to be able to quote the presentation verbatim. That makes it easier for your mind to just go blank in the first couple of minutes, and your mouth is going to go on auto, and then it realizes, dude, I know this, and everything just clicks into place. If it happens in the middle of a sentence, it's happened to me more than once, just stop. Again, nobody knows what you're going to say, and maybe this is part of the presentation, maybe not. Stop, realize that you own the stage. It is okay if it's quiet for 10, 15, 20 seconds. And if you can't find the thread, just say, nope, sorry, I have no idea where I was going with that. Let me come back to you and keep going. That's how I deal with it. I think you need to unmute. Janice, you're still muted.
Sorry, and I really was saying something really brilliant too. Um, the so other than the comments about what a great presentation this has been and thank yous from attendees, the most important question is, did you make the R2D2?
I did. I did from scratch with very few exceptions. The contraption over my right shoulder is a CNC machine that I built in order to build the pieces of that thing. So yeah, it's 4 years and counting. It's going to be done any year now.
Great. Well, I think I'm going to stop the recording in a second, but thanks again. Thanks, Alexander, and thanks to everybody who joined us. I noticed a lot of people were really, I can see how many people are actually watching versus have gone on to do other things, and a lot of people stayed tuned in to you. So,
Mm,
um,
nice.
and and I appreciated your humor, and I may have live tweeted it a little bit. So,
Oh dear.
so again, thanks everybody, and have a great rest of your day
Thank you very
or night.
much.